Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
I'm choosing heaven today. I'm choosing heaven today. I am walking the road, yeah, to heaven right now, singing I'm choosing heaven today. I am walking the road to heaven right now, singing I'm choosing heaven today. I am walking the road, yeah, to heaven right now, singing I'm choosing heaven today.
Thank you, Stephanie Bland. Boy, the music's so good today, I might not need to preach. I don't know. But I probably will, a little bit. I prefer to think of them not as sermons or as lessons, but as messages. I don't necessarily claim to have something to teach you, but there is a message in my heart that I want to bring to you today. We're starting a new series, but before that I have a joke. A ship sailing in the South Seas noticed a small, what they thought to be a deserted island, but there were 3 huts on the island, and smoke was coming out of one. So they went ashore, and sure enough, there was a man there, and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad that you found me. I was shipwrecked 5 years ago, and I've been living alone on this island for 5 years. I'm so grateful to be rescued." He said, "There's only you?" "Yes, just me." "Well, why do you have 3 huts?" "Well, this is the hut where I live, and this is the hut where I go to church." He said, "Well, what's the other hut?" "Oh, that's where I used to go to church." You know, it's just true. You can't please everybody all the time, so he got in a disagreement with that church, and so he had to go form a new one. That's how it happens. Today we're starting a new series on relationships for the whole month of February, and today I want to talk about sort of the philosophical construct for relationship with God and self. And today it may be a bit of a stretch for you. Some of the concepts that I bring forward you may not feel comfortable with. You may not understand. I may not understand them either, but I'm going to share them anyway. But I hope that you'll just kind of keep an open mind today. One of my first teachers in New Thought said, anything that doesn't fit for you, just put it on the back burner. You know, and I learned in the 12 steps, take what you can use and leave the rest. So this month, as I said, we're going to be doing a 4-part series on relationship. Today I'm talking about relationship with God and self. It's called I Can Relate. Next week I'm going to be talking about intimate relationships. And I thought that would have been a good one to invite Howard Caesar to come back and teach, since he's been married for over 40 years. And maybe we should invite Diane to come back and teach next week's lesson. I don't know. You know, they always say that every teacher, they share from either their mastery or their growing edge. So I'll be speaking from my growing edge next week. And then on week 3, I'm going to be talking about friendship, the power of friendship. It's an incredibly overlooked spiritual tool in our lives. And on week 4, talking about the power of community. And it's also our Black History Month celebration. Stephanie, I'm so glad you're on staff. We've been bringing her in once a year for that Sunday for 3 years. Our choir will be singing. It's really become a tradition for us. But I'm focusing the sermon that day, or the message, on the beloved community, which was a phrase that Dr. King used over and over again. And he felt that community, spiritual community, true community, is the place where we can transform the world. And we're hoping to build more of that here at Unity. But today, we're talking about relationship with God. And I was thinking about this because in Unity, we teach that we are one with God. How do you have a relationship, something you're one with? And it becomes a bit tricky. It can get a little slippery as we're talking about it. And I want us to really be in this evolutionary spiritual growth kind of mindset. So I found a quote from Ellen Davenport in her book, The 5 Principles, and I think this is a good place for us to start. If I had one wish for the world, it would be that every adult re-examine his or her view of God at least once per decade. God may not change, but people do. And we outgrow our old concepts. The ideas about God that we held at 6 may not serve us at 16, and probably not at 60. Just as children outgrow peanut butter and opt for spicy curries, we can assimilate more and different ideas about the universe and its workings as we evolve. So we're having an evolutionary conversation. God is eternal and unchanging, infinite, and yet our understanding of the infinite does change and evolve. And so the image of God, our understanding of God, will change as we grow. In Unity, you may hear words like spirit or universe as synonyms for God. To some people, that's quite comforting to move away from some of the old language, and to some people, that's a little scary, a little off-putting. We may talk about Mother God, Mother, Father God, and again, some people find that really expansive and wonderful, and some people are like, what are you talking about? So today, I just invite us all into this open-minded idea that we're exploring an infinite reality, which is God. Nobody can hold or understand all of God. No one. But we're here to explore our own growing edge of understanding. And the reason why is that it will empower our practices and our teachings if we understand it more or differently. So today I'm using, instead of the Unity materials that we've been studying the last month, in January we did our Back to Basics series, going back to our foundational principles in Unity. I'm stepping outside of Unity to the integral movement to bring in a tool invented by Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber, he's been called a philosopher, but he calls himself a map maker. He has studied all of the world's religions and philosophies and sciences and arts, and he has attempted to map them on an evolutionary understanding. And one of those maps that he has created, he calls the 3 faces of God. In all of the world's religions, everyone will emphasize 1 or 2 of these. We might think of them like the parts of speech. First person, I am an expression. I am the place of divinity. The second person, the you, the thou, that I worship God, I love God, I pray to God. The third is the it, the universal. All that is God. There is nothing outside of God. Okay? So those are the 3 faces we're going to be talking about today. This is the frame. And what Wilber says about this is that to be a truly integrated, integral spiritual being, we must be able to stand in all 3 of these places with understanding and with a sense of connection. Okay? So I'm actually going to begin with the third one. The third face is the it. When I grew up in the Pentecostal and Methodist traditions, and the only God I knew was that one out there, and he was usually mad at me. So when I got to New Thought, and I heard this word spirit, and I heard this word law, it was a different understanding for me about what God is and how it works. And so if you weren't able to be with us last month, you might go back either on YouTube or on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, and watch the first couple of series, or all 4 of them, actually. I thank you, Jean Marie, for bringing last week when I was away. Thank you, Karen, for bringing the 3rd week. But in the first week, I spoke about this first principle, is that God is all there is. It's the building block upon which I'm building today's sermon, and particularly this third faith. In New Thought, we speak about God as law. Not law like legal law or the police, but law as in the law of cause and effect, the law of attraction, you may have heard it that way. That there is something that is principled, that it's how it works. It's the generator of energy and the way things move from thought to manifestation. This is how we teach that it works in Unity. Our affirmative prayer is that thoughts held in mind produce after their kind, and that happens through the law. And the law is impartial. I was taught in the Science of Mind Church, where I did my studies in my 20s and 30s, that it's impersonal. That's a little hard for me to take because I'm a people person. But I can go with impartial. That the law doesn't care what you're thinking. It doesn't have an opinion about it. There's no punishment in it. And that's where I learned the idea that we're not punished for our sins. We're punished by our sins. That there is something that is acting upon all of our choices and our beliefs, no matter what they are. So if you believe in disease and lack and struggle and poverty, guess what? The law says yes, yes. And we begin to co-create with this amazing infinite resource and energy, the very aspect of our lives. And that's all there is this one infinite presence. And as I was speaking with Karen between the services, it was really hard for me, because I am so relational, to give up the God that I loved, even though that God was mad at me a lot. When I got into the 12 steps, I was told that I might need to fire the old God I came in with. It sounded sacrilegious. You can't fire God. But there's this idea. Have you noticed that religions have different gods? Have you noticed that? Different names and different qualities. They describe it differently. In Unity, how many gods do we teach there are? One. One presence. And it's the people that make up the differences. That it's revealed to us over time and experience. That we each, in Genesis it says that God made man in his image. Well, yes, that's true. We have that co-creative quality, but we also make God in our image. And so many of us have this idea of a God with arms and legs and a face. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I needed to let that go and embrace this universal, impartial, lawful understanding of spiritual reality. And what that did for me was that it freed me from this old idea of a child-parent relationship where I was constantly getting punished for doing the wrong thing. And because we can bring that relationship right into our metaphysics, and we can just be punished by our own negative thought. But really, we're not being punished. We're not being punished. We are working with the very mechanisms of reality. And that third person can be, that place of being with the third face of God as the impartial it can be healing and freeing. But for me, it left me kind of cold. I had grown up with a very expressive spirituality, particularly in that Pentecostal church my grandpa would drag me to. People laughed and they cried, they danced, they shouted, they ran around the church. You might know all that. That's kind of fun. But there was a deep feeling of that relationship with God. You've probably heard the language, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that kind of language, that feeling of deep connection. And I missed it as an adult. So in my mid-30s, I began to feel that ache to be loved by God and to be able to say, I love God. Because my teacher in Science of Mind had really asked that I just put that aside. And it was probably about 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I heard a speaker in the New Thought tradition quote something from Hafiz, the Sufi poet from the 1300s. And I have a better translation that I'm reading through now, and I'm loving it. One of our members gave it to me. But this one is actually from a looser translation by Daniel Ladinsky. And this poem really said something to me. Every child has known God. Not the God of names and not the God of don'ts. Not the God who ever does anything weird. But the God who only knows 4 words and keeps repeating them, saying, come dance with me. Come dance. And that feeling of connection, of a God that longed for me, that I could connect with in that personal way, it came flooding back. And I began this process of integrating a loving, just incredibly gushy relationship where I just want to be loved and express love. I began to integrate that with my Science of Mind training on the law and the principle, and something just started to make sense. And then I discovered this teaching of the 3 faces of God. That I can have both. I don't have to have one or the other. That I can practice in these principles fully grounded in that impartial knowing of the mechanics of reality, and I can still love God. In the oneness movement, there is a strong teaching around this to simply choose a personal divine, whether that be Jesus of Nazareth, whether that be Krishna or Vishnu. It doesn't matter. Just choose something. See, the Hindus have a deep understanding of this human need to connect to God. We think of Hinduism as having hundreds of gods and goddesses and deities. They do, but there is underneath that a deep understanding of one presence, one God. We can think of it, in Unity we talk about the waves and the ocean. We think about reality or as spirit or God being an infinite ocean, and upon the surface of that ocean are infinite numbers of waves that are distinct, unique, have different motion and speed and shape. That's us. That we can see that we contain something unique, and yet we're part of the one. And we can have that same understanding in our relationship with God. We can fall in love with the ocean, or we can fall in love with a wave, knowing that it's just a way in. It's a connection. The benefit, the healing thing that comes from this opening to this second face of God is that our hearts are brought in alignment with our minds. And that we're able to bring the sense of love and support into our spiritual practice of affirmative prayer. So you probably wonder why we sing praise and worship songs at a Unity church. That's the whole purpose. It's to open our heart and be able to say, I love God, and to know that God loves us. The trap, and we have to be careful of this, if we only spend time in this second face of God, is we turn him into our mother or our father. I mean our earthly mother or father. And that we will be found wanting, or how many of you still struggle sometimes with that idea like doing it wrong? There are so many of us, I've talked to you, I'm not going to point you out, but I know who you are. You recovering perfectionists. How comforting to know that we are loved eternally, cherished even. So here's my challenge to you with these first, it's actually the second and third face of God, but my first and second point today. If you are uncomfortable with an impartial God that is not anthropomorphized in any way, not a father, not a person, then this third face of God, exploring the principle, the law, it will grow you spiritually. If you are uncomfortable having a relationship with the loving Creator who desires to be known to you in a personal way, if you're uncomfortable with that, if you will explore it, it will grow you spiritually. And it's not either or, but to allow God to love us and allow ourselves to express love for God. It will change us. The third, again, I've done them in reverse order. The first face of God, the third point today, the I. This one is a little harder. You thought those first two were hard. Just wait. The fact that I can be divine. I have a friend who's a fundamentalist. I don't know if he's fundamentalist anymore. He's had a bit of an awakening in that realm, but definitely evangelical minister and musician and songwriter. We were hanging out for a while in Dallas, and he'd come around to Unity and to other New Thought churches, and he'd be like, wow, y'all sure proud of yourselves. You like to brag on yourself a little in that church, don't you? He said, I think it's good. I'm just not used to it. In some of the traditional Western religions, there's this idea that we are just dust and worms. You know, that's that. If we only have that other God out there, this is something that shows up. And to be able to claim divinity as me, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. One of the ways, there's a phrase that I picked up somewhere which has really helped me to hold this differently. You will never hear me say from this pulpit that I am God. I won't say it. Because for me, God is the second and the third face of God. That's the all. That's the infinite divinity. I am not that. The way I understand that is this. I am not all that God is, but all that I am is God. I'm a part of God. I'm an expression of God's being. There's nothing in me that is not God. Well, then how'd I get to be so human? How'd that happen? And we made a division. We've said that there's part of us that's divine, and then there's a part of us that's human. And what I'm now working on, I ask you to join with me, is to hold those together as well, that our humanity is divine. Ernest Holmes said, humanity is divinity revealed. If we were willing to step into our divinity, what would it change? If we were to hold ourselves as being not just a child of God, but an expression, a part of God, how would that change for us? How would we show up? What would our opinions look like? What would our judgments of others look like? What would our opinion of ourself look like? I was called to ministry at 15. You heard the story. If you were here early on when I became senior minister, I shared, for my first day as senior minister, I shared a lot of that story. You can go back and watch it. But I resisted being a minister, particularly being a senior minister, because I am so human. And I had been in the church my whole life, and I had witnessed up close and personal ministries absolutely shipwreck on a minister's fallibility and humanity. And I wanted no part of that because I am fallible and I am human. When it became clear as I was on my spiritual evolutionary path, this is what was calling to me. And believe me, it was not from a sense of ego and wanting to be grand. I didn't want this because I was scared of it. I'm too human to be a minister. I was at the Big Sky Retreat 3 years ago. Dr. Jean Houston was our keynote speaker and facilitating us. One of the things that she is so good at is making these exercises. She creates these processes by which it moves us with body and mind and heart into a new place of not just understanding, but embodiment of principle. And one of them she created is called the Entelechy. And she asked us all to stand and to place our hands in front of us and imagine that right in front of us was another being with its hands extended to us. And this being was full of nothing but divine energy, enthusiasm, intuition, wisdom, and love. And it was loving us and giving us all of these infinite resources. And we were to stand and receive the divinity coming to us. To just let that divinity flow into our humanity. And then she tricked us. She said, now I want you to stand and take the place of the Entelechy. And you are the infinite intelligence of God. You are the unconditional love of God. And you are giving it to yourself. At that point, Howard had already asked me to be his successor here at Unity. Nobody else knew. The board didn't even know at that point. And I was struggling with it. Am I going to be good enough to do this? I was committed, and I trusted God, because a long time ago, somebody told me that God does not call the equipped, God equips the called. I'm banking on that. But in that moment with Dr. Jean Houston, I felt something in me come alive. I felt the divinity of my own being tapped into the infinite resources of God. And my yes became stronger. If you're willing to own your divinity, it makes you so much more useful to God. Because you're not, oh, who am I? I could never, I'm just little old human me. You become, I am the power of God made manifest in a human lifetime, in a human body, in a human heart and mind. And when you show up as that, I have been told I'm not singing enough. I wrote this song from a place of deep surrender and deep willingness. That whatever God needs me to be, I'm willing to be that. So I invite you into this with me. I am one of many with just one life to live. The gifts I have, great and small, I give them all. I give.
simply, purely from my soul I give. Here I am, a vessel to be used. Whatever Spirit needs of me, I will be, I will be, I will be. Here I stand. My heart is here to serve. Wherever love is leading me, I will go, I will go, I will go. With open heart, I love. With open mind, I know the truth within me. With open eyes, I see the gift unfold. I give my open hand for you to hold. Here I am, just a vessel to be used. Whatever Spirit needs of me, I will be, I will be, I will be. Use me, oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me. Lord, show me all that I must do. Whatever Spirit needs of me, I will be, I will be, I will be.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.